Welcome everyone to the January 2024 OpenNTF webinar. Today we have debugging as our topic with some excellent presenters both on the admin and developer side. Kim Greeny, Michelle Smith, and Paul Albright are joining us today. And let me move forward. There we go. So we've got just a few introductory comments, then we'll get right to the presentation, and then we'll have our Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Come on, there we go. Just a quick word of thanks to our sponsors, which is HCL and Prominic. As always, they're very generous with their time and financial support, and the community very much appreciates it. And speaking of the community, again, OpenNTF is us, all of us, not just the people on the board or the presenters or whomever. It's everybody, and we all learn from each other, and we would like to be able to share. So if there's something that you got, either a question or something you'd like to share, please get in touch with us. I've got a slide that has the link to the Discord server that we use for the community in a few slides here, and you can find us there. Quick note about upcoming events. We have a repair cafe. We started our repair cafe last year and are doing monthly repair cafes. For 2024, we've combined, in 2023, we had separated out admin topics and developer topics into separate repair cafes. This year, we're going to just combine everything together, so no question is out of bounds, and our next repair cafe is this time slot 1 week from today, and it is on our Discord server. Again, I'll share the link on that in a few minutes. A couple of other global user group happenings around the world that we'd like to share. Czech Republic has Sutal, the Lotus user group there is going to have an in-person meeting on January 31st. And if you'd like to get more information about that, let us know and we can pass along for the people that run Sutal in the Czech Republic. DNUG in Germany has several in-person meetings coming up over the next several weeks. Berlin, Hamburg, Leipzig, and Stuttgart as listed there. And then Engage in Antwerp, Belgium is going to be in April. That's going to be a big in-person. In fact, all three of those events are going to be in-person events, or all three of those meetings, if you will, are going to be in-person meetings. There's the Discord link, so feel free to take a quick screenshot there. This is also going to be in the slides afterwards that you can download off the OpenNTF server. And that will get you into the community where all of us tend to hang out and keep an eye on things going on during the day and answer questions and so on. So that's the place to find us, or the best place to find us, I'll say. Webinars. After this one in February, we've got some REST API details from a Domino administration perspective. Heather Hottenstein has presented before, works for HCL, and is a grand administrator. We've done presentations together before, so that's coming up in February. And then in March, Kim is coming back and going to do some Domino security best practices. We've actually got a full slate of webinars planned out almost, I think, until September or October. So stick around. We've got a good series of webinars planned for this year. And questions. I'm going to guess that this screenshot is now obsolete and we're going to have to work on getting a new screenshot in here. But the general idea for questions is that we're going to save them to the end of the webinar. So go ahead and type your questions into the question panel, and then we'll ask them of the panelists at the end of the presentation, and that way it gets recorded into the YouTube video that we're recording. And then all the questions and answers are going to be there together. If we do run over on questions, we'll actually get them typed up and put into a separate blog post that's available on the webinars page. So yes, this is being recorded, and yes, the slides and the video are going to be available. And that's my last slide before the presentation. Let me switch over to you there, Kim, and you can take it away from there. And go ahead and unmute.
Thank you.
Okay, off you go.
Okay, welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be connecting in from around the world. Myself and Michelle Smith and Paul Albright are going to be giving this session on debugging Domino with the Diva and the Dudes. So a little bit of background information about myself. I started my career at IBM many years ago and actually worked in the development laboratory, working in the performance area for the then AS400, now known as the IBM I. I knew I wanted to leave IBM and do consulting of some sort, so I moved to partner role for developers, started working with Domino, and loved it. And so in 2000, I started my business. And basically, my company is an extension of IT departments around the world. We do a lot of the heavy lifting. We do lots of debug, which is really why, one of the reasons we're doing this session here today. We're extensions of their IT departments. So we do health checks, security reviews, we do performance analysis, we do upgrades and new infrastructure, update applications, write new applications, whatever it happens to be. So our focus is the collaboration portfolio from HCL. And you'll notice that my blog is the dominodiva.com, and that was what gave us the idea to name our title, our session, Debugging with the Divas and the Dudes. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the other diva, Michelle, to introduce herself.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. I'm also the owner of an IT consulting company. So for me, that means I'm a freelancer, self-employed, enjoying this stage of my life. I started fixing IT problems in my university work terms, and I learned there that I really love solving the puzzles that come with IT. My first exposure to Lotus Notes and Domino was actually in migrating a non-Y2K compliant mail system to the Domino platform. So for those of you who spent, that New Year's in a data center somewhere, I feel for you. I did as well. And I know that was a long time ago for a lot of us. My focus area as well is with the HCL collaboration portfolio, and I'm working with Kim these days, supporting a bunch of great clients. And I'm going to turn it over to the dude now.
Hello, everybody. My name is Paul Albright. I work in HCL support. I've been doing this for going on 25 years this month. Uh, I support any of our products that have any kind of application development part of it. I support that part of it. I'm just one of those people that I found something that I really like to do and I'm very good at, so that's why I'm still doing it here. I've got a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science and a Master of Science in Management, specializing in computer information systems. And yes, the dude does bowl. Kim, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Paul. So here's a look at our agenda. We have a lot to cover, so we're going to go pretty fast. Where hopefully we'll get through everything, and hopefully we'll get to a few questions at the end. So we're going to start it with there's a problem, now what? Because that's something we deal with pretty much on a daily basis in the IT space. We're going to spend quite a bit of time on scoping the problem, and we'll give you several examples to show you how important it is to make sure the problem is properly scoped, because if it isn't, you're going to waste a lot of time and you're not going to necessarily be able to solve the problem very well. And then we're going to talk about the items that you need to make sure you have debug set for all the time, and then logging properly put in place. So in case when you do run into a problem, because we know we will, because we work in IT, that you have all of the data that you're going to need to be able to do your analysis, or at least the bulk of your data. Then we're going to spend quite a bit of time in the troubleshooting essentials session. Again, we're going to cover lots of different examples here, and we're hoping by the end of that section and really the rest of the presentation, by the time you leave this session, you're going to walk away with a really great set of tools that's going to give you the knowledge and the confidence to know how to go in and properly troubleshoot and solve those domino debug problems. We're going to spend time on documenting and communicating, because that is something we don't always think about, especially when we get into the heat of the moment. But it's really important. And again, we're going to show specific examples there. Then we're going to move into working with HCL support. And then if you want to bring in your business partner or consultant, just some tips and tricks and things we've learned through our experience. And then we're primarily going to wrap up with resolving the issue. We're just going to show you just really quickly some of the third-party and free tools that you can use to accelerate your troubleshooting. And then we'll hopefully get some time for Q&A. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Michelle, and she's going to walk you through there's a problem, now what?
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, and so it begins. So you're starting your day, And back in the day when we were in the office, you're taking off your jacket, you're walking to your desk, you're saying hi to your coworkers, and then, oh shoot, it happens. People are panicking. Well, oh my God, everything's changed, phones are ringing, details are coming in vague, confusion about what the issue is, and incorrect conclusions are being made right from the get-go. So does this sound familiar to anyone? I wake up at night thinking about these events in the past, so it sounds very familiar to me. I'm going to hand it over to Paul for more details.
Sometimes it's in the smallest details on where your solution's going to lie. Good example of this is a case that I was collaborating on with one of my mail routing suites. They had a customer that was seeing intermittent issues sending emails. It was just happening with a single user, and the mail routing suite and the customer's admin it was troubleshooting this through the mail routing. Spent a couple of weeks, could not come up with anything to help. Reached out to me, see if there's anything I could do. So we jumped on a call, and not only did we jump on a call with the admin, we jumped on a call with the end user themselves, and we had him showing what was happening on, and it turned out that the only issue happened when they were trying to send an email from a particular application. Uh, Took 5 minutes. I looked at the code behind the buttons, found an issue with the script there. We resolved it, and the case was closed. So if we would have known about that, 2 weeks earlier, there would have been so much wasted time doing wasted troubleshooting on the mail routing issues there. Another case. This is one of my favorite issues I've ever resolved in my life. This happened back when I was still in school, way back in the olden days, and I was doing end user support for computers for Sears. And had a customer call in and come on, and the thing is that every time I flush my toilet, my computer restarts. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm getting pranked here. There's something going on. But I looked in there. He had actually called in a couple times, reported the same issue, and I could tell the guy was about this. So we jumped on a call with him, and I was helping him do some normal troubleshooting things and things like that. To run some diagnostics on the hardware, all those kind of things. And then while I was chatting to him, he just happened to mention that he lived in a trailer. And then started talking a little bit further about that, and it turned out the trailer, in that trailer, his toilet was an electric toilet, and it was in that it happened that his computer, it was on the same circuit as that toilet. So it turned out every time he did flush his toilet, his computer restarted, and we plugged it into a different circuit in the trailer, and that resolved the issue. That to me, that's just a good example. You got to look at the big picture sometimes. Kim, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Paul. That's one that always makes me chuckle when you tell that story. So here's another situation where the problem is happening again. This is a pretty common occurrence you have with customers when you work with them on a regular basis. So we had worked with a customer. This was probably about a month ago or so, and they had an application, and they found that when users were clicking a lookup button within the application, it was actually having an error. And we got in a web meeting with them at that time. We fixed the problem. And so we got a ping from our customer in our WhatsApp. We have a WhatsApp share group that we have with this specific customer. And they said, hey, that lookup problem's happening again. So we said, okay. We went ahead and connected in. We started troubleshooting the application. And we came back pretty quickly and we said, well, it's working for us. We're not able to reproduce it. So let's do a screen share. So we get in the screen share. And the customer said, oh, no. Oh, wait. It's not that application. It's this other one. So be really careful and making sure that you get all the right information before you start delving in and getting into the weeds for problem solving. So, and that actually takes us into scoping the problem, which is really what that particular situation exemplifies. So there's lots of things we need to look at and items we need to gather when we're scoping the problem. The first thing is who's impacted, right? Where are they located? How many people are impacted? Are they internal, external users? Are they both? So if you have users, almost all of our customers now have operations worldwide. So it may be that the users in China are impacted, Or is it the users in San Francisco? Or is it the users in New Zealand? Who's impacted? How many people are impacted? Is it in an entire plant that's impacted? A whole location? Is it just specific individuals? Is it specific divisions? Are they located in the same building? Um, Another one that helps to really hone in on where to start your debug is, are these internal users, external users, or both? For example, if they're external users, how are they connecting in? Are they connecting in through a VPN connection? So you can start looking at the VPN right away. Are they not VPNing in and they're going to, an external facing website? Well, then, okay, those users they're not behind the firewall. So it really helps you to hone in where to look. And then, are any executives involved? Because we all know that if we have any directors or executives or VPs involved, that problem is going to get a higher level of focus. And we certainly want to make sure that our beloved Domino doesn't have a bad reputation in our environment. So that always is very, very critical as really the number one thing in scoping the problem. It's also really important then in looking at, for solving the problem, as far as what the prioritization is, how is the business affected? Is this something where you have a lot of employees that aren't able to do their jobs? Is it a situation where it causes your company to actually lose revenue because no one can connect in? So again, we have lots of manufacturing companies, and if all of your distributors can't connect in and put in their products or their orders and such, that can be a direct loss of revenue for your business. So it's really important to look at those items when you're scoping the problem. But that's not all. There's a lot more you need to look at. What are the platforms that are impacted? For example, if you have your Domino servers, or maybe you have some servers running on your IBM, you have some on Linux, you have some on Windows. What are there? Is it platform specific? Is it release specific? And this is really critical, especially when you're working with HCL support. They work with so many different customers in so many different environments. They don't know your platform. So it may be obvious to you, but it's not going to be obvious to them. So make sure that you have detailed that in your scope. What protocols are impacted? Is it users that are connecting through Nult's client? Is it the example that we talked about earlier, right? That Paul got on the meeting with the customer and the SWE and found out, well, it's not actually a mail routing issue. It's not SMTP. It's a whole different problem. But you could have issues where people can't log in at the same time, and then look at the LDAP server. So really, it helps to look at what are the specific protocols and the ways that users are connecting in that are having problems. And again, that helps to narrow down your scope of where you're looking. Has anything changed? That's one of the questions certainly we always ask, and sometimes you don't always get all the right information right away. But it's really important to know, was it a hot fix, or a fix pack or a patch put on the operating system? Or was there a security change that was implemented in the operating system? Did the Domino version change? Did you put on a new fix pack? Did you put on a hot fix? Same thing applies to Nult's client version. Has anything changed there? Applications, this is really one that we tend to see to be the most common cause of issues, is application changes are made, they're maybe not fully vetted, and therefore if we know that an application has changed, then we can go in and pretty quickly look, and especially what changed the application. Okay, we know that they made some updates and status of this new function, these features. We can go and look at those portions right away. And then certainly looking at the network, looking at the firewall, and we do have specific examples on these that will help you in understanding the significance of looking at all of this when you're scoping the problem. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Michelle to talk about more critical items to gather when you're looking at scoping the problem.
As we mentioned before, screen captures and videos, they're going to be your best friend. Picture is worth 1,000 words, and a video would be worth exponentially more. You can see exactly what the problem is. And remember, when you're screen sharing, do it with the affected user. If you can avoid the middleman as much as possible, that's going to help you get to the root of the problem faster. And is it reproducible? Is it something that's intermittent, or is it a reproducible problem? And if it is reproducible, what are the steps needed to reproduce? If you know that, you can really kind of narrow down your, make sure you have your problem well defined. Next slide, please.
It's changed. Did it not show for you? I've changed it.
Just changed for me. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so all of this is important to understand. So, at this point, you're scoping out the problem, so you don't know what's important, so treat everything like it's important. Just something to remember. So a few examples. So this first one, say user A of a notes workflow application is not able to send auto-generated mail to another user. So you get that reported from the support desk. And things we know, this first user has been using the application since 2022 and it's now 2024. So the assumption gets made that the user would have reported the problem sooner. But is that really the case? So, you really need to find out when the problem started. So a way to restate that might be, when was the time that this last worked? And, if you ask that, then the answer may be that it just never worked. You may find out some more information as you start asking these questions of the user. So in this particular problem, we actually asked for a screenshot if there's any error messages, and the person was able to supply this error message when they clicked the button to submit a document. And as soon as we saw that, we knew, well, this is one person. There's at least 50 more people using the application. Perhaps this is actually on the Notes client side rather than an application or network issue. So this is really kind of pushing you towards, what may be a factor, what may not be a factor. So we kind of honed in on the Notes client on this one. And, the resolution was found. We actually searched that error through the forums, the HCL forums, to get hints to what that might be. And we're going to give you more on that in our troubleshooting section. So another example, there's a global business that has offices in China, India, and the US. And during certain times of day, they're saying users in China and India cannot connect to the server via Notes or a web browser. So we know the Domino servers are hosted in the US, and a log review shows that the server is up during this time. So there's no errors on the server at all, just the users can't get to the server. We found out that the hosting provider, so these servers were hosted at a cloud hosting data center, and the hosting provider was helping along through this problem, and they suggested setting tasks around at different times during the night to kind of help the issue. We found that the China and India users were the only ones impacted, and they were asked to run scripts to test connectivity to the data center. And when we started, really delving into this, we kind of thought, well, what's missing in this? It seems like people are assuming that it's a network problem, that it's a Great Firewall of China. Of course, that wouldn't impact India. So we're really trying to, figure out what this might be. So we take a look and we realize this isn't really well scoped. So we took a look at the scope and we said, has anyone tested in the US at that time of day? And this was one of the big things that was missed in the scope. And why might that be? Well, users in the US, due to different time zones, this was 3 a.m. Central Time. So no one was using their email at this time. So we decided, well, we really need to find that out. And, is it impacting the US? So we set our alarm clocks for that 3 a.m. Central Time. And we actually tested. And sure enough, we could reproduce the problem in the US. So that immediately took, or it lessened the thought, sure, it's slower from India and China, but they should still be able to use the server. But at this period of time, nobody was using the server. So we knew the scope changed very significantly at that point. We eventually traced this issue. Nightly jobs in the data center of that cloud provider were running. You'd normally think it wouldn't be impacting anyone during the night, but because the users were in India and China, then that was causing those people problems during their business day. So once that load was taken off the server, then our Indian China users could connect again. So another example, there's an issue that happens randomly during the day for a period of about 30 minutes. I think we're getting quite a delay in this.
It must be because, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
noticing, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Users receive delivery failures for emails they send externally, and users that receive incoming emails, they're receiving them with EML attachments rather than a properly formatted email. So, we took a look at it, and we wanted to find out exactly when this issue was occurring. We realized, we're using the times that it's being reported to this support desk, which is not a really good indicator of when the problem is actually happening, and we want to get exact times. So to determine the exact times, we reviewed the log.nsf around those times that the user was reporting the problem. And we found a key message, and it was this file cannot be created. And so we knew the error, or we thought we knew the error at this point. So we ended up searching the log.nsf for that error throughout the whole week of the log to see exactly when it was happening. So we could track times that way. And then we thought, well, what else is happening when this issue is occurring? And we eventually found that through talking to the client, just having a good rapport and chatting, that they were having backup issues around this time too. They kind of started around the time that the problem started. And we were able to correlate the exact times of the error in the logs in Domino with the times of the backup. And we found there was quite a correlation between the two. So we kind of had something to further our investigation. So that was really, really handy. So right now, I think I'm going to hand it back to Kim.
Yep. Thanks, Michelle. So hopefully by listening to all the examples that Michelle talked about, it's really important to scope the problem properly, because if you don't have the problem scoped, you waste a lot of time. And the examples that Paul provided as well, a lot of time can be wasted. You can if you scope properly, you can do good problem resolution done more quickly. So one of the next sections we're going to talk about is enabling debug and logging. This is really important to have in place so that you have the right data when you start doing your analysis. So some of the core debug, you don't want to always have debug on all the time, right? We know that's a heavy load on the server, but there is some critical core debug that should be in place all the time. And semaphore debug is one of the things you want to always have enabled. And this is specifically because when you have semaphore timeouts happen, it's a timing related issue. And so there's specific set of events happens, which may not happen every single day. So if you don't have the proper semaphore debug in place, it could be days, weeks, sometimes months before the problem is able to be reproduced. So that's going to definitely lengthen your time to be able to solve the problem. So what's the core debug needs to be in place? You want to have debug thread ID equal 1. And basically by setting this, what's going to end up getting logged within the console log is the identity of the process or the thread that's actually holding the semaphore. Because then you have really critical data. What has a semaphore? And then what's therefore backing things up that everyone else is waiting to get that resource that has a semaphore lock on it. You also want to have debug capture timeout set in your debug show timeout for additional data about the semaphore timeouts that are happening. And then you want to determine your sem debug, set your debug sem timeout equal, and in this case I show X because you can really set it to whatever you want. 30 is a very common value. So if a resource has been held for 30 milliseconds and hasn't been freed up, then it's considered a semaphore timeout. That may vary in your environment, so that's why you can set it to a specific value. But make sure those are set on all your servers. You have to end and restart your servers for those to take effect, but they should always, always, always be in place. Deletion logging. This is something that's extremely helpful. It was added into, I think, release 10, so it's been in the Domino code base for quite a while. It's really helpful to determine who deleted something or what deleted something when you have deletions happening in a database and no one knows why. So let's take a look at an example. So we had a customer about 2 months ago. They came to us and they said, we have this situation. We have a shared mail database. Multiple people use it, and we have some documents that are missing. So we started delving into the problem. We found out it's a mail-in database that all the invoices get mailed to. And there's an external process that takes and pops messages off and processes those invoices. But sometimes there's something not quite formatted correctly with an email that's sent to an invoice that's sent into the mail-in database. So there are multiple notes users that access this. And they had this situation where documents were just missing and they couldn't explain why. So we went ahead and enabled deletion logging. And sure enough, I mean, I have this data redacted, so we keep the customer data private. But you can see it was really easy to identify. Well, you can see CN, which is the common name of the user, and we could see that they were doing a hard delete. So what ended up happening is a user was taking data that was happened to be in the trash folder and actually doing a hard delete instead of leaving them in there as a soft delete. This is something that's really, really valuable. It does place extra burden on the server because you're now logging the data out to, it's just logged to a flat file. So it's not like a complicated file, but you don't want to say, well, I'm going to turn this on all my databases. Just your really critical core ones, but it can be a really, really helpful tool. Some other things you want to collect on a regular basis, certainly you want to look at your domino statistics and have those collected, but you also want to look at your system statistics. And particularly, you want to make sure you're able to capture and have the data already collected, what's happening with the CPU, the memory, the disk, and the network. Because if you don't have the data available, performance problem or some other issue or some resource contention, you are missing a big piece of the puzzle. So here are just some common examples of performance tools depending on the platform that you happen to have your Domino server implemented on. So let's take a look at an example. Here we have an example of collection services. This is the performance tools that are built right into the IBM i operating system. So for those that tend to think it's the green screen monster and it's this archaic system, well, take a look at this. Here's an example of a system, the system resource health indicator. So we can see very quickly that there aren't any issues with CPU or memory, but boy, we have issues with disk. So we can see that 30% of the time we have a disk problem. And of that 30% of the time, 10% of the time, which is a pretty big amount of time, it's a really critical problem. So we can delve in and we can look at the disk health indicators, and we see here the biggest issue is the disk response time. So obviously, if the Domino server is sitting and waiting on disk and waiting for data to come into memory so it can do its processing because the disk doesn't have the proper response time, that's going to cause performance issues. So we're able to go in pretty quickly, figure out what the problem was, get the disk issue sorted for this customer. So it's really important to have that data collected for the whole system that's hosting your Domino server as well. We also have activity logging. This is a great utility. It's been in Domino for, many, many, many releases. What it does, it allows you to determine what you want to record, but you can find out for individuals what their activity is, which is really, really helpful. What protocols are those users doing their activity through, and what activities or even what protocols are even being accessed on the server. And actually, when we get into the troubleshooting section later, Michelle has a specific example for this related to protocols and activity logging, or what databases are being actively used. So you can kind of find your heavy hitters this way as well. It's really, really, really great if you have any performance issues. So you can really quickly go in and find out, are there any specific applications or protocols that are causing your performance slowdowns, or if you have spikes in CPU, or is it specific user activity or a specific user? So really, really great tool that you have available, just need to enable it. Message tracking is another one of those that we use with customers and on a very, very regular basis. What this does, it allows you to track any email messages that are sent to a Domino server or through a Domino server. So what you can do when you have this enabled is you can figure out for an individual message, was it delivered? Did somebody read it? Did they delete it? What time did it arrive? Who was it sent to? Who was it sent from? What servers did it pass through? How did it get there? So lots of really great detailed information. Super easy to set it up. You go into your configuration document on the router SMTP tab, go into message tracking and set your settings the way you want them, and just bounce the router task or just wait 3 to 5 minutes and those settings will be in place. So really, really critical to have that enabled as well. And now we also have to look at, what about your applications? And what about events that are happening in your application? So where are those typically going to get written to? Well, any activities happening on your Domino server, that's all going to get written out to your console log. And we have lots of customers that write application errors to the log as well. We have more information in the presentation on better ways to do that. But your console log, you want to make sure that you're not losing data. So if you have a really busy server and you haven't set the console log size, then you could have the situation where your data is going to wrap. You don't want to lose that data. So, but you also don't want to set your console log to be like really, really large. You don't want to set it to be like 10 gig or anything like that. So what you can do if you have a really busy server and you find that your console log is wrapping, you have it set at a reasonable size, you can enable mirror logging. And what this will do is it creates a separate file. You still have your console log, but it creates a separate file. And what it does is as that log gets filled up, the mirror log gets filled up, another one gets created. So now you're not going to lose any of your data. So that's a really handy thing that you can do for very busy servers. Separate logging databases, we highly recommend this, especially for applications. It really, really, really makes your analysis a lot more efficient. You don't have your console cluttered. You're not going and looking through your console to find application errors. And we have specific examples we're going to talk to in the troubleshooting essentials section. And then the same thing really applies to agent logs. And again, we have examples in the troubleshooting section that we're going to talk about. But with agent logging, it's not just about logging, but it's about what not to log. That's really, really important because if you are logging sensitive data, let's say you have a problem in an agent and you enable some print statements, remember to take those out because you don't want to have customers' first names, last names, or phone numbers or addresses in your logs. In case somebody gets a hold of the log, they could use that data maliciously. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Michelle, and she's going to talk through lots and lots of different examples and essential things to look at with troubleshooting. So take it away, Michelle.
Thank you. So first of all, to take a breath, breathe, don't panic. Back in the day, many years ago, I was working in a high stress environment and I had a coworker who would look at me and he would say, Michelle, you just need to calm the heck down. And that was a really, really good lesson to me because, these are issues, we'll get through them. We're smart people, but relax. That will help. And one of the things you're doing when you're working with other people, especially, don't hide embarrassing data. So, this can significantly delay problem resolution. If you did something by mistake, that's all right. Admit it. Remember, we've seen it all. They've seen it all. It's kind of like going to the doctor. It's not a big deal. Next slide. Don't forget to be methodical in your approach, and don't forget the basics because some issues really are quite simple. We kind of get pulled into, we remember the complicated ones and we may start thinking they're all complicated. We had this one example with Marvel Client. The customer utilizes a Pan-Agenda Marvel Client to push connection documents to users. And we noticed that those connection documents were not being sent, pushed to users for any new Notes clients. We knew they were pushing out a new version as well. So we thought maybe it was related to the new version. But when we actually reviewed Marvel Client configuration, everything looked like it was working. And then we saw that the license had expired. So a really simple solution, which is update the license and we were ready to go. So that's a good one to remember. They're not all complicated. So now to Paul.
A lot of times when you're trying to troubleshoot a situation, if your intuition is telling you something, listen to your intuition, because a lot of times it's going to point you in the right direction. A lot of times I'm reviewing some code in a customer application or design or something like that, and I'm just drawn to a particular area of the code or particular area of the design element. And more times than not, when that happens, that turns out to be the issue. And I'm not trying to say I'm some kind of psychic support or support suite or anything like that. It's just the fact it's something I've been doing for so long that it's when something looks off, it just triggers in my mind. It's okay. You guys are the admins and the developers of your Domino systems and your applications. You know those things better than anybody else. If your gut's telling you to look at a particular area, look into it. I mean, it doesn't hurt. If it's not if it turns out not to be the issue, then you move on to look at something else. Kim, I think you have an example as well.
I do. So this was an interesting one, and a customer that had their environment was they had their mail server was on they had a Linux implementation. They had a mail server that had the data on a SAN, and they had intermittent performance issues. And the customer was very, very convinced that it was the SAN because they said, well, there's no way that could possibly be the network because it has a 10 gig pipe to the SAN. So there's absolutely no way it could be. So as I was listening to the customer and looked at the system just quickly, my intuition said it is the network. So went ahead and delved in and looked at the VM that basically was controlling the Domino server and found that it had multiple NIC cards on it. And not all the NIC cards were created equal. There were two that were 10 gig, and then there were a number that were 1 gig. So I said, well, hey, what else happens to be running on the VM that's controlling this Domino server? I said, well, we have security cameras because it was a manufacturing company. So you can imagine they have loading docks all around the facility, and they have all these security cameras set up at all of the loading docks. And they had an application on this VM that also, and along with the Domino server, that would occasionally go out and it would download data from security cameras. So just think of massive quantities of video being downloaded on the network. And I said, I'm pretty certain that's the problem. He's like, I can't possibly be. Domino has its own 10 gig connection to the SAN. Can't possibly be. And I said, well, can we do an experiment? And he said, sure. And I said, let's get a user on the line. We're in our conference call, and let's do some experiments. And so he went ahead and called Mary and said, hey Mary, how's performance? She said, it's really great right now. I'm not having any issues. So he said, well, hang on a second. And so we're all in this conference call. And so he went ahead and he turned on the application to pull data from the security cameras. And he said, how is your performance now? She said, oh my gosh, it's frozen. I can't do anything. Like, what happened? So he went ahead and he stopped the application. He said, well, what's it like now? So it's back to normal. And he did this about 5 or 6 times because he was so very, very convinced it was the SAN. My intuition said it was a network, and certainly was. So what we found, and we actually looked at more detailed configuration of that host, it was set up to use a round robin policy. So it turned out that the Domino server did not have that dedicated 10 gig connection to the SAN. It did when we were done troubleshooting the problem, but go with your gut. It's typically going to be right. Another thing when you're troubleshooting problems, finger pointing doesn't help. We've all heard it many times. Maybe some of you have said it. It must be the network, right? That doesn't work if you're also the network person. But the goal here is to not, toss over the wall and have it be the hot potato. The goal is to rule out what you can and focus on solving the problem. So that's really what the whole point of this troubleshooting essentials section is. So let's go ahead and we'll talk about some other things you can do. So Google certainly is going to be your friend. We Google all the time. It really is extremely helpful if you use the exact error message. And I have also found that it really helps depending on whether the problem happens to be with Domino or Nomad or Notes or Leap or Enterprise Integrator or whatever it happens to be. You put the HCL Domino, HCL Notes in front of the error message and you tend to get better results. You also should be looking in your internal knowledge base. Well, you have one, don't you? If not, you certainly need one. So this is a problem that happened a couple of weeks ago. Got a customer said, hey, we've got this problem. And the IT person that was working on the problem, they emailed us and said, can you help us out? We have a situation where the user, whenever they open the Notes client, they get this error, configuration hasn't been fully set up. So we went, asked a few questions and found out that this support person had actually just installed the Notes clients. I said, well, did you go through all the configuration? And it turned out they were new to the department, so they weren't used to all of the steps they needed to perform. So I was able to point them to their own documentation, and they were able to really quickly solve the problem. So it really helps to also have your internal knowledge base because everybody's systems and environments are different. So the more that you have internally documented, the quicker it's going to be for your problem resolution. And now I'm going to turn it over to Michelle. She's going to talk about another really cool tip for searching for knowledge base articles for solutions.
Yeah, this is one Kim and I use fairly often. because we noticed this along the way in adding cases. A quick way of searching the HCL forums and knowledge base articles. We actually go in and open a case, kind of open a case, and we select the product. We put the error message in the problem description, and when we do that, it will bring up related content. So sometimes it takes a few minutes to load, so take a look for it. But it was in the second, if you look at the screenshot, the second hit that it found. You can actually see file does not exist on notes document.send, and we thought, okay, that is the code is probably doing that. So we took a look there, and it was at the bottom of this section, someone actually contributed to this forum post and pointed us to client settings in the notes client, because the notes client will want to, if you're expecting it to actually trigger a send mail command through Lotus script, it's going to want to be able to touch a mail file of some sort. So that kind of gave us the hint, and we were able to solve the problem pretty quickly.
You need to pick up the
Another
pace a little bit.
Thanks,
another
Paul.
thing to Another thing to remember is run maintenance on impacted databases. And why is that? Well, sometimes there's a little bit of corruption in a database, you get the weirdest issues. And the other thing is HCL support is going to ask you to run these. Another thing, and so we have the details of the maintenance here. It's a typical, if you've done the maintenance before, it'd be very familiar to you. Fix up compact updall with those are the switches that we would recommend. And another thing to remember when you're doing this, make sure you're documenting the results of these runs. Some of the information you find in there could be key to seeing what the problem was if you fixed it through the maintenance. So on to reviewing logs. It's key to know the specific dates and times the problems happened occurred. And it's, again, particularly important to know when you're correlating logs between different systems, so domino and non-domino systems. An example, file cannot be created. We saw the error in log.nsf, and then we were able to gather further information using the third-party tool, and it was the Wytria ScanEasy tool for searching the logs. Actually, it was Console Easy is what we used for this one. And once we had the times, we were able to correlate the errors back to the start of the backup. So that was very key. And when we talk about logs in general, you have to check the appropriate logs for your problem. Domino logs, notes logs, Xpages logs in the case of an Xpages problem, HTTP logs, agent logs, and etc. So know what you're troubleshooting, and take a look at the logs that are appropriate for your problem. So now, Paul.
Thank you. When we're looking for our X pages, working with our X pages applications, and we're running into issues, the logs we're going to want to look for these are going to be in the Data Domino workspace logs directory. There's going to be some error dash logs and some trace dash logs in there. There's going to be multiple copies of them. Make sure you check the few newest ones in there. The contents of these files can help you locate what X page is going on. The errors can help narrow down what's going on, what's happening there, what to look at. For example, if you're getting any kind of a Java error in there, and you only use that particular Java class in one or two spots in an X page, you've narrowed it down to just looking at those one or two spots. Next slide, please. Here's an example. This is just the very top portion of them. These things are very, very long, but you can go through and you can pick out key things in here, like the error messages or the different error messages in there that can help you troubleshoot things. I'll be perfectly honest. These things are very, very verbose, and they're better off for the development team looking at. But you can often find clues in there. Kim, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Paul. HTTP logging is something that you want to have enabled if you have HTTP enabled in your Domino servers, because you never know what's going to happen and what kind of problems are going to happen, when they're going to happen. So this happened a few years ago. And we had a customer contact us. They were quite panicked. They said, we have the situation where we have emails that were sent from our vice president of HR, but the emails were actually not sent from the vice president. So we knew they had their notes client locked down and that wouldn't be an issue, but we knew they had HTTP enabled on their server. So we went ahead and looked at DOM log, which is where our HTTP logging is, and we could see that the first login was at 1:26 a.m. on November 30th. And what was really most important is the vice president of HR didn't use webmail. So it's like, oh, we know somebody has, is now connecting in through HTTP. And we could see when we examined the DOM log that the first login was successful. So they weren't hacking and guessing a password and made a weak password situation. We knew they had the credentials. So how the heck did this happen? Well, we found out to continue to do investigation. Found out that the VP of HR the day prior had been at a coffee shop and they used their mobile device. And in this case, they didn't yet have SSL implemented on the Traveler server. It got implemented very, very quickly after that. But what was really neat about this, by having the data in DOM log, the customer then said, okay, well, we can see what's been sent, but what did they read? What attachments did they download? And we actually used the Whitetria ScanEasy product, and we were able to go really deep into DOM log and get all that data for that customer, so they knew what kind of damage control they might need to handle. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to Paul to talk about agent logs because he's our developer guy.
So a lot of times, one of the most popular ways that developers will debug their agents that's running on the server is just to add print statements to it, so you can track what's going on in the flow of the agent and help narrow down where the issues are. Um, and that's a valid practice to do, but often that debug stays around, and then your console logs are just being filled up with just constant print statements, especially if the agents are running constantly and things like that. So and as Kim cautioned earlier, there could also be some private data in there depending on what you're actually logging. So you got to be careful with that. So what I would suggest doing when you're going to do this kind of debugging is create a Boolean variable, let's call it debug, and that way you're only going to write out the debug, the print statements when that's enabled. So for example, I've got a quick example down there on how to do that. Just and once you're done debugging, you just go back in there, set that debug to true, and it quits printing. If you need to start debugging again, then you just go back and enable it again. Next slide, please. Another way to do this is to use the notes log loader script method to go ahead and log your log your agent output. This way, you can send it to either an email, a text file, or even a notes database. This is going to keep your console clean and allow you to look at just the data you want to when you're going to use this. And there's a link for that class, and there's plenty of examples in there if you want to use that. Kim, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Another one that we highly recommend is OpenLog. This is actually an OpenNTF project that's been available for a number of years. We highly recommend all of our customers to use this, and many of them do. And what this allows you to do is this works with either LoaderScript or Java agents, and you can log messages or error messages out to this OpenLog database. And we have an example here on the next slide. It makes it a heck of a lot easier than trying to comb through the console log. So here we can see there's different databases. There's different views you can use, but this one's just sorted by date. And we can see that we have, we have an agent starting, and it's doing some deleting documents and does a bunch of inserts, and it finishes. That all looks good. We see there's an actual error. We see a bit of information about the error, and we have some examples later that we'll talk about when we talk about looking at errors even for external systems, for example, like DB2. But this is a lot easier than looking through console log, and you can slice and dice this data any way you want, build your own custom views, but very, very helpful. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to Paul to talk about debugging agents.
So anytime if you're trying to debug what's going on with a particular agent, I highly recommend you go ahead and turn your agent manager debug on, and you can do that with the tell AMCR debug asterisk, and that's going to enable all of it. And that's going to tell you a lot of information about what's going on when the agent runs and things like that. Make sure to turn it off once you're done using it. There's no reason to, again, to fill up your log with information you're not going to need. And to that, just tell AMGR debug off. And pay attention to the specific agent messages that are coming back. There's basically going to be three types coming from either AMCR, agent manager, or agent message itself. Next slide, please. So understand that the AMGR message is usually coming, these are coming from an external source where we've handed control off to another process, and and it's returning a message for us. And here's some examples of what those would look like. And the first one there is just it's coming back from an external source that we got an invalid field there. And then we got an SQL example here as well. And this is coming in. It's coming in from from a backend thing that we've got an object variable not set error. So we know we can look at it's something's happening when we hand control off to something else. Next slide, please. The agent manager itself messages these are coming from the agent manager itself. These are normally going to be something, things like security issues. Kim, can you show the examples? Here's some examples of those on different things. And a lot of times these in here will tell you what you need to do to resolve the issue. So make sure and look, so you're having issues with this, look for any kind of agent manager messages in there. And then finally, we have the agent messages itself. These are coming from the agent code itself. Whenever, like from print statements, things like that, where the developer is putting something out to the to the to the console there. And if another script if those and you're manipulating forms, views, and etc., it's going to come from the agent itself. If there's something happening with one of those things, though, with one of those things happening there. The biggest tip I can give for this is use the Lotus script debugger. You can use this to debug any Lotus script manually, even if it's a scheduled agent that runs on the server. If you can run it manually successfully, go ahead and do it that way. Or if you're in the middle of an application and you're getting a Lotus script error come up, enable the debug Lotus script debugger for under the tools menu in any of the clients, and just hit continue until you see the error. Once you see that error, whatever line you are in that Lotus script code, that's the line that is going to be throwing the error for you, and you can look closer at that. Kim, back to you.
Thanks, Paul. So some other things you need to look at are your firewall logs, and we have examples of these later in the presentation. Look at anything that's happening on your hosting system, the operating system. Any other environments the Domino server happens to be connecting to, whether it's Domino applications on another server or external resources like DB2, and then activity logging, message tracking. Again, we have specific examples of each one of these. So here's an example for firewall logs. We had a situation where users were experiencing a lot of delays when they were connecting to their mobile devices, their sync delays. And this was a situation where the customer had implemented high availability in the Traveler server, but again, it was something that happened weeks before. So why all of a sudden are the users having sync issues? So we went ahead and connected in, checked the Traveler servers themselves. Everything looked good. The Traveler servers had a green status, didn't have any resource issues. The Traveler servers could reach each other. There weren't any connectivity issues there. We continued to dig and ask questions, and it turned out we started looking and said, hey, we need to get the firewall team involved, and we found out that they actually made some updates and they're blocking critical ports. So it's really important to examine everything, not just the Domino logs themselves. And as far as the operating system, here's an example. This happened about 2 weeks ago. We had a customer that they reported luckily it happened over the weekend, that some users had reported really slow response times and they weren't able to resolve the problem. So they said, contacted us early Monday morning and said, hey, can you, connect in and see what the heck's going on? So we did. Didn't see anything out of the ordinary in the logs. Port traces to the servers seemed just fine. So didn't seem like there was a network issue at all that we could see. And so then I said, okay, well, what else could it possibly be? Went ahead and started looking at what is happening on the operating system logs, and I could see that the backup that had started Saturday evening was in an event wait state. And what ended up happening is I reviewed the backup logs and found out that they had run out of the tape volume. So they didn't have any more tapes in the tape drive, so they weren't able to finish the backup. So the backup sat there and waited. And what ended up happening is that Domino server, it had locks from the backup, and so that was impacting the performance. So pretty simple solution, and the backup, we didn't have to bounce the server or anything, but it's important to not look again, not just at Domino. When you're reviewing other environments, here's an example of OpenLog. For a customer, you can see they have a number of different applications. Here we're sorted, we've clicked, on the errors by date. And so we're looking at specifically at ones that have errors. And we can see that a couple of agents have lock ID couldn't be created, but then we can see here we have DB2 connector errors. So we can open one of those documents up. And what's great about this with when you're logging an OpenLog, gives you tons of information. So we can see who the user is, what their effective name is, what level of access they have, what roles they have in the application. So we could rule out security related things right away. We can see what nodes client they're connecting in from. We can see the actual agent and the method that is having the error in. We see the exact error message. So lots of information we can gather really, really quickly by having that data written out to OpenLog instead of trying to comb through the console logs. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Michelle, and she's going to talk about activity logging examples. We're not hearing you.
You're on mute, Michelle.
Thank you. Another example, we wanted to disable POP3 on port 110 and only allow secure POP3 activity. So we wanted to help the client to proactively help the users to make this change. We didn't want to block anyone's access. But who's using POP3? So to figure out who's using POP3, we actually looked into agent log. So so we give you the details on how to well, you have to enable it first, of course, but then how to use it. You go to Tools, Analyze Activity, select POP3, and I think we have an image there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There is a lag. Yeah.
There's quite a lag. So in this example, once we've run the activity analysis, we can see that there are in the POP3 report, there are 3 users using POP3. So that gives us, we know which users are contacting the server using POP3. We know the users we need to hit. And actually, if you expand these lines, you'll even see the IP address. So that's really critical in helping to change those users over. So next slide, we're going to talk about message tracking. So we give you the details on how to use it, but just as a note, remember that the data reindexes periodically. So by default, every 15 minutes. So so if you're actively troubleshooting something, don't be surprised. You may have to wait 15 minutes for that information to be in message tracking. So it's a great way to find the delivery status of emails. We had one example where users reporting they didn't receive a specific email. Well, we were able to use message tracking to actually trace the details pretty quickly. And in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see the delivery status on this image is showing delivered, but the mailbox status is showing deleted. So the user either accidentally deleted it, or perhaps there is a rule in there that deleted that message for them. And I'm going to hand that back over to Kim now.
Thanks, Michelle. So what are some other things that you need to look at for troubleshooting essentials is what led up to the issue, because the more history you have about what led up to the issue, the quicker you're going to be able to solve it. So we had a situation within the last couple months where a customer of ours came to us. They have a custom written application that we wrote for them that they use on a daily basis to search all of their emails. And they have malicious emails come in. They can do a search really quickly. They can pull those right out of the user's mail files. So from a security perspective, it's something very, very important to their IT department. And the searches are typically blazing fast. I mean, they're like seconds to maybe a couple minutes to search thousands of mail files. And what the customer found is they were seeing that some of the searches were slower than they used to be, and we didn't really know why. So we connected in, And first thing we checked is certainly the application, right? Did something happen in the application? Were there any errors? There weren't any errors there. Everything looked fine. We examined the console logs. We couldn't find any correlation of anything happening on the server that was explaining it. And so then I thought, well, maybe something's happening on the system. So I went ahead and analyzed the performance of the hosting system. Again, didn't find any problems. So then we went back and we said, well, this application we wrote for them, all of the searches that they do, the search results are all logged. So then we could see, what's the search criteria, what servers are they searching, number of mail files, and then also how long it took for the searches. And what we found in doing this is that the searches, the intermittent slow search times started happening on September 23rd. Well, that was a while ago. And I thought, wait a minute. As soon as my programmer that wrote this said, I'm looking as they started on September 23rd, I'm like, let me go back to my notes. And I went and looked, and sure enough, I upgraded the server on September 22nd. So we had a change at the Domino server level that was a few months prior, and that took a while for that problem to be noticed, because typically the searches are quite fast, and that's a problem we're still resolving because we need hotfix from HCL. So some other critical things when you're looking at troubleshooting, make sure you've done all of your analysis before you start making changes. This is absolutely essential. This is not an option. If you start making changes, then you have no idea how those changes are going to impact anything that you have analyzed, and you could throw away a lot of really good analysis time. Once you do finally have the problem resolved, make sure that you change one thing at a time. It's really easy to just kind of go whole hog and say, okay, I'm going to start making all these changes. And we know oftentimes there's a lot of pressure put on you to solve the problem, but you really need to be methodical and be firm and say, we need to understand what fixes the problem. So we need to do one thing at a time. And now we're going to go into the next section, which is documenting. It might seem kind of boring, but it's really, really critical, really, really essential. So what do you want to document? Well, everything, every single thing you can. So Michelle talked about earlier about screen captures, and Paul talked about the importance of actually seeing, what the users are seeing, and getting in the meetings with them and seeing their screens and finding out what's really going on. So any error messages, anything like that, any screen captures, make sure you document that. You also want to document what you've found, anything that you've done, when you made any changes, who made the changes, the reasons for the changes, and then date and timestamps are really, really critical, because as you're doing correlations, you think about the examples that Michelle talked about with the backup problem, right? Something completely outside of Domino was impacting things. We hadn't looked and really paid close attention to the timestamps on the Domino server when those errors were happening. It would have been impossible to correlate those happening on the actual outside of the Domino environment. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at some demos. I have some samples here I want to share with you. So these are examples of documents. I have the data redacted, so we don't have anything being shown that you shouldn't be. But this is actually a document that I've used, and actually this is something that I used when I was working a problem for a customer where their unread mercs were not syncing. So I documenting what the specific error is and some other errors I found and what I did to remedy those. But you can see that I worked on this case for a number of days. Actually, I'm still working on it because we're still waiting to get a hot fix that really does fully resolve the problem for the customer. But what debugs was enabled on what days, what were the results. So we're just keeping track of this information, because there isn't any way that, looking at this now or thinking back, what did I do on July 4th? What did I do on June 19th? What were the results? It'd be really, really hard to remember. So we have it documented, and this is great. Then you can just copy paste, put this in your cases as well. Let me take a look at it, show you another example I have here. This is one, actually I just went past it, of installing. This was one where a customer, we had a problem with installing a language pack. Actually, the language pack installed fine. Just the end result, what I was expecting to see, wasn't what I had anticipated. So what was great is I had all my screen captures. Here's, what I did. Here's the screen captures. Then I could load this up to the case. HCL could see exactly what I had selected to see that, yes, certainly the product had installed the French language had installed. I have the success message here, and then I have the very details down on the very bottom of this of here's why I'm opening the case and here's what I'm looking for. So it made it much, much quicker to go ahead and resolve that problem. So highly recommend fully documenting things. And when you start, do it right away. Don't wait. You will forget, especially when you're in the heat of the moment and people have a lot of pressure on you. You're trying lots of different things. If you don't document it, you're going to forget. And for something really complicated, you'll forget the order you did things, and you can't. Did I set it to this or did I set it to that? What value did I have it set to when I tried this? So you got to start right away. And if it doesn't seem relevant, doesn't matter. Document it. And you will find out that oftentimes it is relevant because think about your intuition. Why are you looking at that? You have a hunch that it's related. Remember, everybody is panicking or at least stressed. So just keep that in mind, but make sure you still do your documentation. And what's really great about this will then be part of your knowledge base, whether you have a formal or informal knowledge base, at least parts of it will be part of it. You're going to kind of take out those, oh my God, type of items or anything that's turned out to not necessarily be related, but it's really helpful long term. And when you're making any changes for your notes initialization file, make sure you document who is doing the change, why did you do it, and when. So here's some examples. So here we can see that I, Kim Greeny, changed the NSF buffer pool. I changed it back in 2019, March of 2019, from 300 meg to 750 meg to improve performance. And you can see I've had those fully documented. This is really critical. This next example I want to specifically point out, this debug agent thread equal 4. So this is set because we had a customer had an issue with their application server, and we had a hot fix, and we needed to, when I applied this specific hot fix back in May of 2020, I needed to comment it out so it was not active. And then I went ahead and the next hot fix I installed about 2 months later or a month later, I was then needed to remove the comment so that
we need to pick up the pace.
That debug became active. And so then in the end, we finally got our hot fix that fixed the problem in November of 2020. And that was what was required, is actually leaving it enabled. If you don't have this history and somebody might come in and rip this out, and all of a sudden your server is going to start crashing. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Michelle to talk about communicating.
Okay, thanks, Kim. So, remember when you're communicating, you want to communicate what's going on and what to expect, and that's very key. And you want to think about the frequency of your user communication and exactly what's going to be in your messaging, because it's going to vary depending on your audience. Some of your audiences will be stakeholders. For example, your CIO, they will want to know what's going on because they will be asked, and if you tell them beforehand, they will appreciate that a lot. Business users, you want to let them know. Support desk is going to be different communication for them, and also the affected user. As an example, when you're sending emails, send them to the organization if you can, if it's not an email issue, of course, and let them know this is a known issue. We expect to fix it, this period of time. If you can estimate it, that's great. And remember to send further emails, once the problem's resolved. People appreciate it, and it'll slow down your calls to the support desk. And remember to keep your communication open, honest, and ongoing. If you're dealing specifically with the user, pick up the phone or do a screen share. That's going to help. Call them, and you need to know what they are seeing, and most importantly, what they are doing. And it's important to avoid assumptions. These can cause important information to be overlooked. We trust our guts and that sort of thing, but also you need details too. So, and then before you assume, because we're human and we see patterns and we try to match things up. But before you assume, make sure you ask the right questions. And we have a little diagram here for you: false assumption and action. That middle point, that midpoint is really, really scary. And more on asking questions. Don't just accept what you've been told. If something doesn't make sense, get clarification. That's very important as well. Use open-ended questions. Don't ask someone something where they can just say yes or no, and key in on those pauses. Make the people talk, give you more information. It's exactly what you want to do. And we used to have this term in a high stress support environment, and it was everybody lies. And it's not meant to be mean, it's just they do it intentionally or not. Because we're all imperfect, and but just remember, don't take what you're told as fact. You will also need to verify that. We have one example, it's happening constantly. So here's, in reality, the issue is happening whenever they start notes, but they were bothered by it, so they used the different language. And some thoughts on how to get people to talk, get them to, help get them to uh, relate to them as much as you can. Say, I apologize, I didn't make it more clear, or help me to understand, just to get them talking. Be super helpful. And now we're going to turn it over to Paul for working with HCL support.
Okay, so bringing in outside help. So you've taken as far as you can. What do you do next? Especially if you think it's some kind of a bug with Domino, open a support case with us, or bring in your business partner or consultant if you happen to have one. If it is a bug, you definitely gonna need us to be able to help fix that for you. Get you a hot fix for it, or get it fixed in a future release, depending on the issues. Next slide, please. So this is an example. This was a case that I had opened up from Kim and her team. Um, she went through and she did everything here that we've been talking about so far in this presentation. So when she opened up the case, I had a nice little Word document that went through and showed every step by step on what they did, how they narrowed it down to the particular Java agent, and the config properties not loading. So by the time I got that, when I got that, I was able to read through all that, see what the issue was, able to create a simplified version for myself that I could get up to development so they could look into it. And it turned out, started in 1202, we actually started setting a Java default for the properties. So prior to 1202, we didn't have anything in there, so you could just add the configure that properties to an agent, no issues whatsoever. But however, starting in version 12, they actually set that default for the JVM. Uh, and that caused us, we were able to get a workaround for this, and it was just basically open up that the config.properties file a different way using that particular line instead. With bringing in outside help, it provides as much detail as you possibly can. Remember, you're the person that lives, breathes in your environment. You know the history of your environment, and you know everything that has changed, stayed the same. Any places you're having issues and things like that. Pardon me. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. Proper preparation before opening a case. Collect as much detail as possible. Like I said in that last example there, I had everything I needed to start the case out. So it led to a quicker resolution, and it allowed me to before I even contacted Kim the first time, I was able to like I said, I knew everything. I was able to get things up and and get it reproduced so I could get development involved. If you know the database that's causing the issue, run maintenance on it. Sorry. As we all know, a lot of times when you open up a support case, one of the first things that they're going to do is ask you to run maintenance on it. Go ahead and do that ahead of time and get it done. Save some time. Be very specific on what you've done so far. Let us know what troubleshooting you've taken and like that, so we can go ahead and use that to start. Next slide, please. When you open a case with us, be open and honest. We don't care what caused the issue. We don't care what you tell your boss. We're not trying to pin blame on anybody. We're just trying to get the issue resolved for us. Sorry. If you don't understand why support is asking you to do something, ask questions. We're not out there trying to give you any kind of like busy work or anything like that. There could be some miscommunication. We may not understand the issue entirely. So ask questions. Sorry about that. Um, Keep communication open. If you're not able to perform something, immediately, if it's going to take you a while, let us know. Um, we've got certain support policies on how frequently we follow up with cases. If we know ahead of time you're not going to be able to do this for 2 weeks, we can save everybody some time and not keep throwing in there and keep following you up, follow up for the issues. Um, uh, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong slide. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, expect to be whenever you open a case. A lot of times, if we've already talked, you're gonna be asked to run those particular maintenance commands. We've already talked. These are the ones that we recommended before. So go ahead and do that, and document the case up ahead of time, and then that's gonna save you a day or two on that. You should also have this in your documentation, so you can just upload that to the case. Again, like that case with that Kim opened with me. I had all that ahead of time, so I knew what to do. So we're going to ask you for some specific things whenever, depending on the type of issue we're having. If it's affecting the server, we're going to want the console logs from it. Um, if we're running into some kind of a server crash or server client crashes, we're going to want the NSD files. We're going to, in addition to the console logs. If there's any kind of semaphore debug files created, go ahead and upload those as well. If there's a Java heap dump that's created, that normally we're dealing with some kind of a memory leak, upload that to the case as well, and it's going to be with the .php extension. X pages or domino leap issues, go in and get those error and trace files we were talking about earlier. If there's errors in custom applications, what we're going to need here is we're going to need a simplified, reproducible scenario from you to do this. It's beyond the scope of support to debug or write code for customers. So a lot of times, if you upload a non-encrypted design-only copy of the application, we can go in and take a look at the affected agent or um, design element or anything like that, and and may be able and pull from that out a simplified repo that we can do that. However, a lot of times we can't do that because the custom applications that they're using, you've got hooks into everything. Um, other databases on the server, to where you're pulling up things, specific documents that need to be in place for certain data, those kind of things like that. So what we need is a way to reproduce the issue that you're seeing that doesn't require all that extra hooks into the other applications and things like that. Next slide, please. And so basically, where do you find these files that we're talking about that we're going to be asked you upload? The server files are in the IBM technical support directory. The client files are located there too. X pages is in the workspace log directory. And down there, there's an example of what they will look like, just so you know what you're looking for there. Kim, I believe you'll take it from here.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Paul. The next section we're going to talk about are lessons learned. So HCL ambassadors, I'm an HCL ambassador, and one of the things that is great is we have a separate template that we can use when we open cases. Well, why is this important? This is really important mainly so that the L2 that's assigned to your case, actually then they have the ability to then more quickly go to development. And without having the template be used, it actually can slow things down. So it helps to accelerate resolution of your cases. It also is really, really critical that, especially as you're working on a case and it's not able to be resolved right away, for example, like the unread mark sync one, we're still working on it, is really helpful to make sure that you summarize the information and the case as it progresses. It helps keep everyone on track, and it makes sure that really critical data is not being buried. And the other thing too is, we've had this happen before where it just seems like there's just a misunderstanding, or maybe the support person is asking for something that is not understood. Well, then ask for a screen share, and you can really quickly exchange information, and everybody kind of has the aha moment, and it helps you move forward with the case resolution. Some of the things that that you need to keep in mind: sometimes you get a new person in level 2. Well, we are all there once, so some of us, it has been quite a while since we were. But first of all, certainly be patient, but not to the detriment of the problem not being resolved. So if you have a situation where things are just stuck and they're not moving, what are some of the things that you can do? Well, then one of the things you can do is raise the priority. If you open it as a severity 3, you could change the severity to a 2, for example. And that will get extra attention on that case. And it also then it gives the L2 person more tools in their belt to say, hey, this is a more significant problem when they're going in, if they need to get input from development. If it's really not making any progress, you could always just update your case and say, I would like to have a duty manager assigned to the case. And typically the duty manager will be the manager of the L2 person, and they will then get involved, and they can help figure out what's going on, why the case is stuck, and they can help get some movement on that case. The other thing you can do is you can request an escalation. And with the escalation, that's going to go, then there's a specific escalation team. And what they will always do with you is they will have a meeting with you quite quickly. So those are some things that you can do to get traction on cases that just seem like they're not progressing. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Michelle and talk about resolving issues. And I think we're going to get this wrapped up in time.
I think so. Thanks, Kim. So when you're getting to resolving the issue, so once the cause is identified, you're going to apply your appropriate fix. It may involve, repairing, replacing, updating, doing a whole bunch of things depending on the issue. But you're also going to test and confirm. Make sure the problem is actually resolved and the solution you found is effective for the issue. And remember, don't forget to remove your extra debug or logging. We see this all the time in environments, and the log and the console are very, very full files. So give your console, give your logs a break, and take that out of there. And don't forget, update your documentation. We are very, very big on documentation at KGCI, and our store of documentation has helped us resolve issues for clients very, very quickly, because we've seen some issues repeat. So don't forget to record the problem and the solution for future reference. And follow up with the affected person. Contact them directly. As a support person, when do you actually get the chance to talk to someone and give them good news? It's, not that often. And remember, if you have a support case open with HCL, update it. Let them know it's fixed, so they don't have to track it anymore. They've got enough to do. And I'm going to hand it over to Kim.
Okay, so I'm not going to go into great detail here, but we have links here and different tools for accelerating your troubleshooting with third-party free or low-cost tools. So Marvel Cloud Essentials is certainly something that everybody has access to. It's part of your licensing, but there are a number of other tools here. Lotus Notes Diagnostic, if you need to convert character sets, there's a utility there I've mentioned. We have Kill Notes, NotesPeak, NSF Peak. NSF Peak is an OpenNTF project. There's an all-in-one admin tool, which is actually pretty cool, that HCL has provided. If you have network problems, you want to get Wireshark involved. So those are some of the ones that are free or low cost. There are also other third-party tools. We use the Wytria Easy Suite for our customers, and the Marvel Client products and modules where they're licensed for them, where our customers actually have them. And we do that because in the end, it ends up saving the customer a lot of dollars in consulting expenses. Why pay us to do it when you have tools and utilities to do it and that are more accurate? They also allows us to dig in and really delve in, especially those Wytria admin tools. So at this point in time, we have 2 minutes left, it looks like. So we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Q&A and see what we can get through.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Just a couple of quick comments. But before we get to the question, Heather Hottenstein's on the webinar and left a really fun little tip that I wasn't aware of. New in 1202 of Domino, you can use tell Domino support and pass in a string, and it's going to zip up all the files in the IBM technical support folder. And she says within the last 48 hours, she thinks. And then you can upload all those files nice and easy. So that's something new that I wasn't even aware of.
Ah, they've learned from Traveler, I think.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. The Travelers had it for years.
Lars asked a question. It didn't really ask a question, more kind of left a comment from a troubleshooting standpoint. So it says several of our apps write a lot of environment variables to the notes.ini. This results in corruption of the notes.ini, specifically after settings like log equals, URL address equals, find string, so on and so on. And it says quite random depending on app use. So that was kind of just lobbing that out there. Curious if anybody's got any quick anecdotes to share or thoughts on notes.ini corruption.
I would say one of the key things is to make sure that you're not ever putting it as the last entry in the notes.ini, because those aren't going to be picked up. But I would look at what's available at the operating system to determine what has a lock on the file. Because if you're getting corruption, is something else has that locked. So whatever operating system your hosting system is running on, you're going to want to go in and use whatever utilities are available to see what's locking that file, because there's just typically some contention problem. And Michelle, Paul, you guys have any other advice?
Yeah, I think you covered a few.
It seems to me that,
points.
I actually personally haven't seen a notes.ini that gets corrupted, but if it's that huge, that's probably an application conversation, and potentially make some changes to the app about using so many environment variables in notes.ini. Okay, we have run over time by 1 minute.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Paul.
I was going to say, it sounds like because the Notes client or the Domino server will write to the Notes.ini itself. It will do updates to it. It sounds like maybe that's happened at the exact same time that the agent is updating that Notes.
One thing they could do is set look at their semaphore debug, and maybe they could set the semaphore debug timeout value to a smaller amount. To like 10 milliseconds or something, because then that's going to show, like Paul was saying, that contention, right? Who has it locked? What has it locked, and what's the process? What's the thread ID that has it locked? So then you can go in and do further debug. But I think you kind of have to start there.
Brilliant. Okay, let's wrap it up there. Thanks to all three of you for your time and lots of good ideas and insight there, and made me smile several times about situations that I've been through that ring a bell. So again, thanks very much. And a reminder to everybody, these folks travel around in Discord from time to time. So by all means, please do jump in there and ask questions. And everybody in the community is ready to help you out. And with that, we will wrap it up. Thanks very much.
Thanks, and thanks,
Thank you,
Heather.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.